I wish to inform the House that because of the time required to complete the record of division, it will not be possible to proceed to statements by members. Accordingly, the House will now proceed to oral questions pursuant to Standing Order 35. Oh, we have a point of order.
Question period. No point of order.
I'm sorry? Oh, I'm afraid that one came up. Apparently, they're telling me it came up just before I started. The honourable member for New Westminster Burnaby has a point of order, and then we'll go on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I raised my hand prior to you starting the statement. There have been discussion amongst the parties, and if you seek it, I hope that you will find unanimous consent, notwithstanding usual practice, that we proceed to members' statements prior to proceeding to oral questions today.
This being a hybrid sitting of the House, for the sake of clarity, I will only ask those who are opposed to the request to express their disagreement. Par conséquent,
therefore, may all those who are opposed to what the honourable member proposed, the motion stating no.
Unanimous consent. Oral questions. Question orale. The honourable member for Portage-Lisker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government's disinterest and disdain for small businesses has left many small businesses behind during the pandemic. In fact, billions of dollars announced, but still the commercial rent relief program has been massively not used. Why? Well, because the Liberals got it wrong, because the Prime Minister's top-down, I know best way isn't the right way, and it doesn't work. So when will the Prime Minister, when will Liberals start listening to the real needs of small businesses and adjust this program so it helps them today?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we move forward quickly to support Canadians with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. Then we move forward with the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, which helped thousands and hundreds of thousands of businesses across the country. We also move forward with the Canada Emergency Business Account to help small businesses. And yes, we move forward with a commercial rent subsidy. The commercial rent subsidy program, not being federal jurisdiction, was delivered in partnership with the provinces and hasn't worked as well as any of us would have liked to it, which is why we continue to work on ensuring we can support businesses even better.
The honourable member for Portage-Lisker.
The heart of the problem is the Liberals keep ramming through bills without proper consultation and without letting members of Parliament who represent these small businesses be part of the debate. In fact, they rammed through 6 pieces of legislation, many of which the Prime Minister just talked about, without adequate consultation, with adequate debate. And today, debate is being shut down again on another piece of legislation that could help Canadians, but probably will be very flawed. So why won't the Prime Minister let us do our job? Why won't the Prime Minister listen to Canadians and do a little consultation before ramming through these pieces of legislation?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
In the spring, we were facing an unprecedented challenge that caused all parties to come together. And yes, we passed through historic legislation to support Canadians during this time of crisis, and it helped millions upon millions of Canadians. And I was pleased to see the collaboration of all parties working to get it right as quickly as possible. We're in a second wave right now, Mr. Speaker. While the opposition is playing politics, we continue to focus on delivering for Canadians the help they need, because we'll have their backs.
Well, member for Portage-Lisker.
Well, we could have debated this legislation for 6 weeks, but the back the Prime Minister had was his own when he shut down Parliament to cover up for the WE scandal. So, Mr. Speaker, we'll take no lessons from the Prime Minister on playing political games. The Prime Minister refuses to listen to small businesses, to farmers, to energy workers, to fishers, and to everyday Canadians, and the members of Parliament who they have elected. The Prime Minister is acting in a dictatorial way, and he's doing this primarily to avoid accountability and to cover up his own scandal. So again, Mr. Speaker, why does the Prime Minister put his own interests ahead of the interests of Canadians and democracy.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are facing a second wave of the pandemic right across the country, and the Conservatives continue to want to talk about the we charity. We are focused on this side of the House on the pandemic. We are focused on delivering for Canadians. And while I'm up here, Mr. Speaker, allow me to take this opportunity to express to Canadians my encouragement that they download the COVID Alert app. It's a safe, free, easy way to keep yourselves and your loved ones safe. I encourage everyone across the country, download COVID Alert, do your part to keep us all safe.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, for some 2 months now, the Prime Minister has done everything to prevent parliamentarians from doing their job correctly. Yesterday, I found something very interesting on Twitter, and I want to quote, "I wonder what our great Prime Ministers would think today. Throughout the Second World War, Prime Ministers Churchill and Mackenzie King never considered restricting debate, particularly when it came to budgetary appropriations. Who said that? The Honourable Andrew Leslie, retired general and former Liberal government whip and MP. What does the Prime Minister think about letting parliamentarians do their job correctly? Honourable Prime Minister." Mr. Speaker, we're dealing with an unprecedented pandemic, a crisis that requires all Canadians to work together. Since the spring, that's exactly what we've done. As parliamentarians, we have worked with all the different parties to provide ambitious programs that will help Canadians with the emergency response benefit, with the wage subsidy, with measures to help seniors and young people. We will continue to deliver for Canadians in working with MPs in this House because we know that Canadians need it. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. It's great in the spring, but we know what's been happening in the last 2 months has been the quite opposite. The Prime Minister decided to close Parliament for almost 2 months. He has refused to have a debate in Committee of the Whole, and now they're limiting debate to 4.5 hours of debate, and we're talking about billions of dollars. Why aren't they going to do what Churchill did, which was not limit debate during the Second World War? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, since the beginning of the crisis, we have to work together. Conservatives are playing petty politics while Canadians need assistance. That's what we are doing to deliver for Canadians. At the same time, I want to take this opportunity to encourage all Canadians across the country to download the COVID Alert app. We know that it is available. It will be available likely in Quebec very soon. We want people to do their part and download for free this app to help us to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Yesterday, the majority of Quebecers learned that they were falling back into the red zone. I want to express my solidarity on behalf of the Bloc Québécois with Quebecers for this difficult blow. Today, a poll reveals that 81% of Quebecers want the federal government to increase federal health care transfers. Of course they do. We're in the middle of a health crisis, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, we tabled a motion, an amendment to the motion by the Bloc Québécois to get more in healthcare transfers. The Liberals voted against, the Conservatives voted against, the NDP and the Green Party voted against. Why is the federal government not helping Quebecers during the second wave? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. While the Bloc Québécois is complaining, Mr. Speaker, we are taking action. This week, we have sent $19 billion to help fight this pandemic. This has been the case for all provinces and territories. Since the beginning, we've been there to help the provinces and territories in the work they're doing to fight the pandemic along with us. I spoke to Premier Legault yesterday to highlight again our solidarity, to say that we would be there to transfer money in case of need. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. 500 million, but Quebec wants 28 million. And you know what the Prime Minister said? Well, 81% of Quebecers want the federal government to increase healthcare transfers. 73% of Canadians want the federal government to increase healthcare transfers. The National Assembly in Quebec wants unanimously the federal government to increase healthcare transfers. All the premiers in all the provinces want the same. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc is good about yelling, but they don't necessarily listen. Since the beginning, we have transferred billions of dollars for the healthcare system to deal with this healthcare crisis in Quebec and throughout the country. And we have made the formal commitment to work with the provinces to increase healthcare transfers, including with a First Ministers meeting this fall. We've had 18 First Ministers meetings since the beginning of the pandemic, and we'll have others, and we will talk about federal healthcare transfers. This is a promise that we have made.
For Burnaby South.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the deficit, according to the report that we received, is up to $300 billion. I am afraid, because in this situation, what is the government doing? Two things. One, it will cut assistance to individuals, and second, it will put a lot of pressure on the shoulders of the ordinary Canadians, and that's the opposite of what we need to do. I urge the government to put pressure on those who have made a profit and ensure that the rich pay their fair share. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the first thing that we did as a government in 2015 was to increase income taxes on the top 1% and drop them for the middle class. It was a good idea. Unfortunately, the NDP voted against that initiative. We will continue to help the most vulnerable across the country while we seek to create economic growth for all and ensure responsible tax management for the future. That is what Canadians expect, and that is what we will deliver. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
The Parliamentary Budget Office has announced that the deficit is now over $300 billion. And I'm worried because in that case, governments often do two things. Either they cut the help to Canadians in the midst of a pandemic, or they put the pressure of paying for the pandemic on the shoulders of working class families. Both of those are the wrong things to do. And so far, the Liberal government talks about taxing extreme wealth inequality. No one knows what the Liberal government means when they say that. So will the Prime Minister commit today to something direct, making sure those who have profited off the pandemic pay the price?
Very Honourable Prime Minister.
The very first thing we did, Mr. Speaker, when we took office in 2015, was raise taxes on the wealthiest 1% and lower for them for the middle class. Unfortunately, the New Democrats voted against that initiative. Mr. Speaker, every step of the way, we've had Canadians' backs, supporting the most vulnerable, ensuring that our businesses can come back strong through this pandemic, and ensuring every step of the way that we do so in a fiscally responsible way. That's what Canadians expect of us, and that's what we'll keep doing.
Well, Member for Calgary, Nose Hill.
You know, the Prime Minister just talked about wanting Canadians to do their part with contact tracing very enthusiastically. But that's really easy for him to do, given his privilege. The reality is that somebody has to wait in line for hours for tests right now, and then might have to isolate for days, taking time away from work and family members. So it's not that easy. Yet people around the world have access to at-home testing or rapid testing, and nobody in Canada does. And that's his fault. So he's asking Canadians to do their part. When is he going to do his job?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Speaker, and I share the member opposite's enthusiasm for more testing opportunities and technology across the country. No matter where a Canadian lives, they should have access to testing when they need it. That is why we've been working so diligently with all of our partners to ensure that we have access to rapid point-of-care testing, of which we've approved two. Of course, testing at home is more complex, and it is a challenge for countries all around the world. Mr. Speaker, we will continue. We will stop at nothing to make sure that we have the most current technology that is accurate and that helps contribute to defeating COVID-19.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Nose Hill.
There are people in Montreal today that are being faced with another economic lockdown. It's been 7 months. I mean, like, standing up here and just saying that isn't going to fix the problem. We don't have these tests, yet other countries around the world do, and that's because of incompetence. So Canadians need to know this. No pretty words. When are we going to have access to those tests? When are they going to be in the hands of Canadians?
Honourable Minister.
pandemic, we've worked closely with provinces and territories to make sure they have the resources, both financial and technological, to manage COVID-19. We'll continue to be there for Canadians no matter which province they live in, because no matter where a Canadian lives, they should have access to rapid testing regardless of their circumstance. Mr. Speaker, on our side at the federal government, we're working with industry partners, with our regulators to make sure that as soon as new technology is available and accurate and will help contribute to a reduction in COVID-19, that we have those tools on the market. Thank you.
The honourable member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister likes to say that they're focusing on the pandemic, but he should tell the Minister of Health, because we learned today that we have just bought millions of tests, but they're not approved in Canada. The same tests were approved a few months ago in the U.S., and people are using them. What is the Minister of Health waiting for to accelerate the process so we can have these tests quickly? The Honourable Minister.
Speaker, and as the member opposite has noted, we're not waiting to procure emerging technology. We are working in combination across government to make sure that as soon as new technology is available and approved for safe and accurate use, that we will have access to those tests. I thank the Minister of Procurement for her incredible hard work on this file and on all of the files to ensure that Canadians are safe and have access to the technology they need in their jurisdictions. Thank you.
The honourable member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the provinces need the test, the rapid test, very quickly, not in months from now. The Quebec has places in the red, Montreal, Quebec City, etc. People and families have to wait a number of days for tests. We saw Mario Dumont, who's well known in Quebec, who had to wait for the results, and he appeared on TV at home. We need to ensure that Health Canada can act more quickly, can it? The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in addition to the $3 billion that Quebec has received to improve its testing capacity, to ensure that it has the contact tracing capacity it needs, to ensure that it has the data that it needs to accurately contact trace and ensure that they have the people on place to do that work, we have also accelerated our processes at Health Canada to make sure that as new technology arrives, we are well placed to approve it. We have doubled our regulatory capacity. We have people standing by, working day and night with corporations and with technology developers to ensure that we have the tools necessary to approve those tests when they are safe and accurate.
Honourable member for Carleton.
Canada has 1 million missing jobs. That's how many more people are without work today than in February. Now we have the highest unemployment rate in the G7, higher than the US, the UK, France, Italy, Japan, Germany. They all have COVID as well, but their people are getting back to work. Our unemployment is 3 percentage points higher than in the OECD. When will this government table a real jobs plan so that Canadians can get back into the jobs they love, to put food on their table, and to provide the funds for our cherished social safety net?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, contrary to the Conservatives' partisan spin, our economic policy is working. In fact, just last week, DBRS Morningstar reaffirmed Canada's AAA credit rating, saying, and I quote, "We view the overall fiscal response positively as the stimulus has been timely in delivery, temporary in design, and sufficient in size given the scale of the shock." That is an independent ratings agency reaffirming our AAA. That's who to trust.
Honourable member for Carleton.
You know, every time I stand up and ask about the plight of working people who desperately want their jobs back, the minister stands up and quotes some banker or some high-paid consultant at one of the major consultancies in town saying how much they love the policy. Well, maybe they do. They've had all kinds of benefits showered upon them. But everyday working-class people want their jobs back. They want the chance to earn a living. They want a paycheck. And they know that we have 1 million missing paychecks and the highest unemployment in the G7. When will the government get out of the way and let people get back to the jobs they love?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is simply absurd to suggest that a credit ratings agency is somehow financially benefiting from our government's policies. I mean, come on. But if the member for Carleton doesn't like hearing quotes from external experts, let me quote someone the member may prefer listening to. Himself. And I'd like to remind people that in March, he said, you may want to address COVID-19 with big, fat government programs. We're conservatives. We don't believe in that. And let me say to the 9 million Canadians who benefited from this CERB, that's what you...
The honourable member for Salaberry-Sur-Roi. Majority of Quebecers will be back in isolation tomorrow. I want to express my solidarity for my fellow citizens and all the businesses who are experiencing this nightmare all over again. The pandemic has demanded huge sacrifices from families, business people, everyone. That's why 81% of us are demanding the federal government increase healthcare transfers. Quebecers understand that the healthcare crisis requires, first and foremost, investments. Recurring investments in healthcare by the federal government. What is the federal government waiting for to do? Take action. The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the federal government is here for Quebec. Here are a few examples. $675 million to increase the number of tests, $270 million to help, including for mental health, more for vulnerable individuals. We will create sick leave for Quebecers. What Quebecers need is cooperation, not partisanship, and let's work together. The member for Salaberry-Sur-Roi. The Premier of Quebec wants recurring funding to pay for caregivers, not just for a few months, but for the coming years. 81% of Quebecers want the federal government to increase federal healthcare transfers. The priority for Quebecers is supporting our medical professionals. They're fighting COVID, but also they're fighting burnout. By protecting ourselves and themselves, they can care for people better. Everybody is in agreement that we need to get out of this crisis as quickly as possible. Only the federal government is refusing to do its share. What is it waiting for to transfer reoccurring funds in healthcare? The Honourable Minister. My colleague is talking about personal protective equipment, and let me repeat myself, $675 million for the purchase of PPE, more money for tests, more money for mental health. Mr. Speaker, we're here for Quebecers. We've been here from the beginning. But the Bloc doesn't like that. They like it when we're fighting. The Bloc doesn't like it, but we will continue to collaborate. Thank you.
Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canadians are still looking for the truth when it comes to the WE scandal. And just last night, the Liberal Committee Chair of the Procedures and House Affairs Committee violated the rules by adjourning the debate. The Chair then just cancelled the morning meeting as well. This has PMO written all over it. And this time, we look at this as the proroguement of Parliament. This time, it's happening at Proc. So I ask, as the right to the Chair of the Procedures and House Affairs Committee, when will the committee get back to work to study the WE scandal?
The Honourable Chair.
Mr. Speaker, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague who has brought this motion to committee for her question. The motion that was brought to committee is quite complex. I'm looking into this motion to see if it is in order, and I'm conferring with the procedural clerks and the table officers in order to do so. So I will be getting back to the members of the committee about when the next meeting is as soon as I've completed this task. Thank you, Mr.
The Honourable Member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
And thanks very much for that. I'm just very concerned because last night, as we're sitting in Procedures and House Affairs, the meeting was adjourned. There was supposed to be a meeting at 11 a.m. this morning. And why was it cancelled? Once again, it should not have been cancelled. The meeting should be suspended as part of our procedure rules, and it was not done. I am just wondering why this government is going outside of the procedural rules to cover their butts when it comes to WE. And when are they going to answer the answer to this question on the WE motion?
The Honourable Chair.
Mr. Speaker, once again, since this motion was fairly complicated, I still have not had enough time to complete the analysis of the motion. And as soon as I've done so, after conferring with the procedural clerks, I will get back to the members.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, cover-ups have been the name of the game under this Prime Minister. Time and time again, he breaks ethics laws, gets caught, and then tries to cover it up. And we saw it again last night at the Procedure and House Affairs Committee when Liberals scrambled to shut it down to prevent we documents from coming to light. Canadians have had enough, and they deserve answers. What exactly are the Prime Minister and his Liberals trying so desperately to hide?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're here to work on behalf of Canadians. We're here to serve Canadians. That's why we're working so hard in the middle of a pandemic. Now my question to my colleague, we're in the middle of this pandemic. There's an emergency. And the best thing they found to do this morning was to bring a motion to lose 2 hours debating on a former MP that was not here for the last year. That's what they did.
Honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Yeah, this is coming from the government that just shut down Parliament for 6 weeks and locked the doors on committee rooms. We will certainly take no lessons from them on how we will spend our time. They say they're working in good faith with committees. They shut them down. They block investigations at every turn. They went as far as to shut down the entire House, all its business, for 6 full weeks. Actions speak louder than words. It's simple. Will they unlock the doors and answer questions at proc as to why they really shut down Parliament?
Well, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have this bill in front of us, a very important bill, a crucial bill that is there to help Kenyans, help people that lost their job, help people that have to stay at home to take care of a family member. It also provides sick leave for people that need it, Mr. Speaker. We're here to debate that. What's the problem with the Conservatives? They prefer to debate a motion on MP that left a year ago, Mr. Speaker. We know our priority, they know theirs.
The honourable member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, the second wave of COVID-19 is hitting Quebec and hitting it hard. Times are rough. The government of Quebec is making tough decisions that may have consequences for thousands of SMEs. Businesses narrowly escaped going under in the spring, but are watching the coming weeks with dread. Do the Liberals get it? Will they support the restaurants, bars, and the entire cultural industry, including cinemas and theatres, that were only just starting to get back on their feet? The Honourable Member, the Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his question because it is a good one. We do want to show solidarity with business and cultural companies, all the business people and employees affected by lockdowns. We will be there. We've been there in recent months and we will remain there. We will stay there, of course. We'll be there in the weeks to come with the wage subsidy, with direct support for businesses, for loans to small companies, and obviously with support through EI. Thank you very much.
Nuke Aski.
Mr. Speaker, York Factory, an isolated First Nation in northern Manitoba, has 7 confirmed cases of COVID-19 and others are symptomatic. The community desperately needs tests, medical personnel, PPE, and mental health supports. The rapid testing couldn't land, but there are other ways of getting them there. This first case is someone who had to go to Winnipeg for medical treatment. I have been in touch with the Parliamentary Secretary, but will the government treat this as a wake-up call? York Factory, Northern and Indigenous communities need help now.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're deeply concerned by the recent cluster of cases in York Factory, First Nation, and monitoring the situation quite closely. Since the outset of COVID-19, we've in fact shipped 5 shipments of personal protective equipment to the community. Additional nurses have been deployed to the community, with 2 arriving just yesterday. My department does remain in close communication with community leadership, the First Nation Pandemic Response and Coordination Team, as well as all the health services that are available, and we will continue monitoring the situation quite closely. Thank you.
The honourable member for Whitby.
Mr. Speaker, the COVID-19 pandemic has presented new challenges for all students. but has particularly affected youth in vulnerable and low-income communities. That's why organizations like Pathways to Education are an important resource for thousands of students during this difficult time. Pathways to Education has helped thousands of students living in low-income communities across Canada by providing a combination of supports that remove barriers to graduation and promote positive development. Can the Minister please update the House as to the work our government is doing to support this important organization and our efforts to assist students in vulnerable communities facing new challenges from COVID-19?
Honourable Minister.
I want to thank my honourable colleague from Whitby for his question and his continued advocacy on this issue. Students in vulnerable communities have been disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, and that's why I'm proud to share that our government has invested $5 million in Pathways to Education Canada. This funding will ensure that young people in low-income communities will continue to have access to the critical supports they need and ensure they have access to safe and accessible online resources to remain engaged and support their education.
The Honourable Member for Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, the federal government refuses to fund the Young Subway extension without a formal business case. Yet York Region today is the fastest growing region in Canada with over 52,000 businesses, 636,000 jobs, and home to over 1.2 million people. Demanding a business case is just another excuse so the Liberals never have to actually deliver. If infrastructure is so critical, why is the federal government against the Young Subway extension?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we certainly support public transit in Ontario. We have a bilateral agreement with Ontario that will see the federal government invest over $11.8 billion in Ontario over the next decade, including $8.3 billion for public transit. The reason that we need a business case is that we owe it to taxpayers to ensure that every dollar that we invest gets outcomes. We're certainly willing to move ahead, and we certainly encourage the Government of Ontario to put forward a business case to our office so that we can move forward, and also to prioritize this project because I know people want that project to be built.
Honourable Member for Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, the Young Subway business case has been obvious since it was built in 1954, and it is even more obvious today. The Young Subway extension would create over 60,000 jobs and enable housing for over 88,000 residents, and that's in addition to providing much-needed public transit for thousands of York Region residents. The Ontario government has committed to the project, but the Liberals refuse. When will this government stop hiding behind a smokescreen and fund the Young Subway extension?